Hello, this is Dale Callahan coming to you from our Ask Dr. Callahan Facebook page. We are going to hit a subject tonight that we get asked of a lot. I mean, all the things we try to do here are based upon questions that you ask us a lot, and questions we get from various people that are trying to figure out how to get their kids through homeschool, high school in particular, in mathematics. So if you're not familiar with us, we're a company that focuses on homeschooling, preparing for college and life, college prep material, especially in the mathematics. So I'm a faculty member in the School of Engineering, Alabama at Birmingham, and we've been doing this for a lot of years. We've homeschooled two children that have gone on and done other things now, and then we've still homeschooling two others at the time. So we've done a lot of this, we've experienced a lot of this, but we've been trying to help parents, give them a resource for mathematics, because when we started homeschooling, my wife and I, both with engineering backgrounds, math was our easy subject. Math was something that we understood. We don't understand a lot of other things, but math was one thing that we did understand. So it was, as we were beginning to be asked, almost immediately people began to ask us, how we could help them prepare for math. And that's where we started doing this. We are primarily focused, and I'm not going to say only focused, but a lot of the focus is people preparing for STEM careers, or somebody who might be thinking toward a STEM career. That's STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So some interesting facts about that. That's some of the university's biggest programs, and as we look at the university programs, it's also university programs that the university, we're desperate for people to show up in these STEM programs. We have seats that are not filled because there's a lot of students that do not want to do the work. Well, I don't know. Let me just say, there's a lot of students who do not do the work and get into STEM careers. But on the other side of the picture, there's tremendous industry need for this. I don't know what the perfect stats are, but basically, for every person that we graduate, I'm going to bet there's 2 jobs for them. We do not put out enough engineers, scientists, mathematicians, types of things like that to do the kind of work in industry. We do not put out enough of those to meet the nation's demand. That's just, and this is not about the university we are in. This is just nationwide, because kids don't go into STEM careers. Why not? Mostly mathematics. There's maybe a lot of other reasons, but the math is such a core to what we're doing here. So as we watch parents, and we talk to parents all the time, I'm shocked at how much we've been engaging with parents over the years, and talking to especially moms that are trying to help their kids learn math. Now, look, they may not be going into a STEM career, but to get into college, to think about that, you at least need a certain amount of mathematics to get past the ACT and SAT exam. All college business schools are now requiring calculus. As a general rule, you'll find calculus because there's some stuff they do that's mathematically complicated. There's a lot of math in business. So what we find, though, is parents will say, how do I get my kids not to dread math? How do I get my kids to not hate math, because I can get them doing other kind of subjects? And it's comical, because when we listen to the parents speak, and I could blame this on moms, but we dads are just as guilty. But when you listen to them speak, you hear them say things like, well, I've taught my kid the importance of, writing, and how important that is, and how important communicating is. I've taught them the importance of these various subjects. But in math, you can almost hear the tone is, just get it done. Just get it done. Let me put it a different way. We as parents go around saying, we hated math when we were in school, so here, you do it and you enjoy it. If you think about the message that we are oftentimes sending as parents, now, look, we can't erase the past, I hated I hated math. I hated school and period. But looking back, it wasn't the math, it wasn't the school, it was the way the system was run. That's probably the truth for you too. That we probably did hate math. Maybe you're not good at it, maybe you're not analytical, maybe you enjoyed other subjects better, but maybe you just don't like the way it works because, hey, math was boring, math has no point, math is never used, right? We hear all these things all the time. But what did I just say? Math is a core component in business. It is a core component in business. As a matter of fact, in business right now, we're finding, I'm working with business faculty right now and with a lot of industry. Analytical data in business is huge. You want to talk about a booming career field. Data analytics, we call it, but it's basically mining all this. If you think about Amazon and Google and every company you buy from has a massive amount of data. They have all kinds of measurements. How many times did you click on this? What did you do? What are click rates? Some of you involved in web stuff, you know what I'm talking about. That's a bunch of analytical data. And then we have sophisticated algorithms, mathematics, sophisticated algorithms that we are using to analyze what the customer is doing. How can we serve the customer better? How can we make more money? This is a booming industry. So the world of business is becoming more and more analytical of how they do things and how they operate. So mathematics is just such a core in there. Now, we don't recognize that. We don't talk about that very often because what do we do in math? We pick up the textbook and we open it up and we do the stuff. And look, there is some of that stuff going on because that's the way we've always done it, right? And it's kind of hard to get out of that. If we look at the careers if we look at what we've done to education in general, we've separated. It's like the medical doctor. Have you ever gone to a medical doctor, and they say, and you're saying, hey, I've got this pain, it's over here, and they say, oh, I can only address that one thing. I can't talk about anything else in your body or psychology or mind. If you're a medical doctor, I'm not picking on you, but we're so focused, so isolated, they cannot think about anything else that the impacts might have. And many of you out there that you may have studied how foods and nutritions impact your physical being, you know what I'm talking about, because the doctors, we don't touch that. As a rule, that's not their thing. We're so focused. We've done the same thing to education. We've taken science and we've taken mathematics and we've separated the two. Let's go over here and study science and let's go over here and study mathematics. That's kind of crazy. I mean, we take whole forever courses in grammar, for instance? I know we teach grammar and all that kind of stuff. Probably you hated that too, but you take grammar, but as you grow into high school, you start bringing the grammar and the writing and the literature, and you start bringing that together, because the whole point of learning grammar is to be able to read, to speak, to write. And that's why we learn grammar. The same thing is going on in math. So let me just say, English grammar is to reading and writing as math is to science. And when I say science, I'm not talking about physics and chemistry. Science is knowing. Business is a science. Sociology is a science. Math is how we understand what's going on in the real world. It's if we look out in the world, all these relationships that we see are mathematical. We're talking about there's going to be the eclipse coming in a couple of days. We mathematically know that. Now, some of you don't want to be astrophysicists, but we also understand that there's when our tire pressure changes, with air temperature changes, where there's a mathematical equation that describes what's going on there. When we cook, we see things that are happening. There's mathematical equations that are going on there that explain it. And as a matter of fact, you probably know a lot of these relationships. If you've ever, opened a can and that it was under pressure and you felt the can, like these little cans that spray air that you clean keyboards or things with, and they feel cold. We know as we release pressure of things that it reduces the temperature. We know these relationships oftentimes. And those of you who like to cook, all kinds of relationships, that we understand, and we see these things happening, but we don't know what the equation is. That's okay. But what you understand, a lot of what you understand, and a lot of that you walk around doing in your head, or at least by process, is mathematical thinking. So we do this all the time, and what we don't do in the best way is to bring them together. When you get into college, though, when you move into these STEM careers, the world collapses on you, and the student suddenly needs to bring their mathematics and their science together in one thing, because now when we start talking about physical equations, when we start talking about designing systems, when we start talking about analyzing business data, the mathematics comes into play in the models that we use. So what do you do? How do you, as a parent, deal with this to overcome the mathematical challenges that you have at home that are real? How do you get your kids to connect? So first of all, don't spread yourself saying, "Hey, I hated math." You may have hated math, but don't go around spreading that information and making it clear. You may not have hated the math as much as you hated the system that you learned in. So again, remember that English grammar, that we seem to be okay teaching grammar. It ties into our writing and reading. Math ties into our understanding of the world in terms of physical sciences and all kinds of sociological sciences. And business. Math, though, here's the big giant thing that we don't see. Learning math is learning critical thinking. Learning math is learning critical thinking. You're given some information. You're trying to get to a solution. Sometimes you know what the solution kind of looks like. You're trying to model things. You're trying to figure out from some data that you're given, some information you're given, what the results are. That is critical thinking, and especially as you move into higher math, as you move into geometry and algebra 2 or trig and calculus, you're constantly critically thinking, trying to rule out things, trying to rule out possibilities. As a matter of fact, the SAT and the ACT exams, that is one of the things that they do. They teach your students, they don't teach, but they test your students on the ability to rule out possibilities. Because you have 1 minute to do a problem. So you can't really work the math. You have to rule out the possibilities. So math is critical thinking, is getting to a solution. And now, why does that matter? Critical thinking is the most, when I talk to industry people, they're like, we wish that there were more people who could critically think. That is one of the biggest things I hear, even from engineers coming out of engineering school sometimes. We wish there were more of them that could think critically. When you can think critically, when you can analyze situations, look at possibilities, and think about how do I go about getting solutions, boy, those are in-demand skills in industry. So teaching math is teaching critical thinking. Sometimes what we're doing, we call it an abstraction. We're using numbers and figures and drawings to critically think and to think logically about things. But the mathematics is teaching us those analytical skills to do that, whether we care about the numbers or not. That's what it's teaching us. So how do you overcome it? Again, don't spread the hatred of math. Remember, kind of relate it. Help your kids relate it. Relate it to critical thinking. But here's a big, giant one, and many of you are going to hate this, and you're going to disagree with this. Do not teach math facts. This drives me bonkers. I don't know why I need to memorize the multiplication tables. I probably cannot tell you what 9 times 6 is off the top of my head right now. And you know what? I have a PhD in engineering. I don't care. You can be critical of me if you want, but it doesn't matter to me to understand what those things are. the teaching that memorization of things, I guess there's some, I don't know what the point in this. Let me just say, I don't see what the point is except to drive people to hate things. So teaching this memorization over and over, so what I see happening in the grades 1 to 6 in math, and that is just constant repetition and boredom. And I think as they get older and they see the same thing over again, multiplication of bigger numbers, now division of bigger numbers. Oh my goodness, how many numbers can we put out here and have to add and subtract? Now the skill is important, but constantly doing this, constantly going over things, move on. Once we understand basically how to do things like decimals and adding and subtracting and multiplying, fractions, and graphing data, once we understand this, we need to move on. A lot of times I find the kids are more ready to move on and to get into something that's kind of more fun, because it's more analytical thinking, and algebra and geometry and some of those things are doing it. A lot of moms seem to really worry, am I going into it too soon? My son or my daughters, they're done with all that. Are we moving too soon into algebra? How do we count that as high school credit? They're thinking, instead of thinking about the learning, we get caught up in thinking about the system. The whole point of the system is to help them to learn and to grow to learn and to love to learn. So move on. I don't mean pushing kids past their limits, but allow them to explore. I don't know I think it was Einstein or one of those guys like that wanted to study calculus when they were younger, and they wouldn't let them. Now, I'm not saying you have Einsteins in your house or anything, but there's this desire to explore that we have when we're younger, and it's beat out of us by education. We literally beat out the desire to explore things with people, especially in the regular school systems. So we have the ability to not do that. So one key thing that really helps is to find math in what you love. Now, Cassidy is going to be doing some things. She's going to be talking about mathematics in Shakespeare, probably already has. How do you take some art and literature stuff and see the mathematical relationships in it? Because it's really everywhere that we see things. We see a lot of mathematician and mathematical thinking and musical thinking going together, because there's a lot of relationships. But no matter what it is, whether it's sports, no matter what's going on out there, there's relationships in mathematics that have to deal things. I did a talk one time. We were at a high school and we were talking about technology that's used, and I was just asked a question to the group, and they were like, I said, where do you not use technology and mathematics and things to do it? And some kid in there says, making axes, so I can cut down a tree. It's a wood handle and it's metal. Well, apparently he doesn't really understand how things are made. There's a lot of engineering and mathematics that go into all kinds of things and products and distribution. It's just embedded in everything that we do. And it's so embedded where a lot of kids are in terms of video games, computer material, software and coding, sports, music. There's, any other field that your son or daughter may be interested in, there's so much mathematics out there that are connected to those things. I'm not saying you want to make them a mathematical genius in these areas, but looking and letting them explore, and maybe even spending some of your math time exploring what are those connections, so they see themselves where it is used in the things that they love to do, that they can see that the connections are out there. Look, this is a struggle. One of the things that you want to do, one of the things we want to do, is you want to instill in your kids a love for learning. Not beating it out of them, but instill in them a love for learning, to help them to explore, to help them to see the connections in things. And that's why I keep going to this mathematics is connected to science as grammar is connected to reading and writing. You want to help them see the connections in the relationships, and not just cram through things. We want to make the mathematics and the science explore. We want to stop and see how they are connected. We want to let them kind of go down some of their own path, instead of having to follow such a rigid structure. The rigid structure was what made me hate school, and made me hate math, and made me hate a lot of the things, pretty much every subject. So I shouldn't pick out math. But it's just such a rigid structure where there's no point in learning. We just got to get through it. We got to move to the next step. And we've got this big rush on doing things. The timing, the pacing, none of that matters. We can work through that. What you want is to get them to enjoy and to have a love for learning, and to give them a love for exploring ideas. So I hope this helps. I hope this gives you at least a couple of things to think about, of how do you deal with this struggle in your own home, as you're trying to do math and probably science and probably some other things. How can you connect the dots for your kids and your homeschool? So thanks a lot. I hope Cassidy is going to be with you, or we've planned to. We've had some challenges last couple of days trying to get some things together technologically, but Cassidy's probably going to be with you Thursday as typical. And I don't know what she's going to be talking about, but I bet Shakespeare is involved. So we'll see you next week.